They don't hit you, they don't insult you, they don't even argue with you. But somehow your self-esteem is shrinking, your boundaries are slipping, and your peace, it's disappearing by the day. This isn't just tension, this is psychological warfare. Because some people don't just want you gone, they want you shattered, quietly, completely. The most dangerous enemies don't attack from the front, they come disguised, as a friend, a supporter, even a concerned voice. They study you, mirror you, and then slowly twist the knife where no one else can see. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus warned, "You become what you give your attention to." And if you give attention to the wrong person, you don't just lose focus, you lose yourself. In this video, we'll expose 5 chilling signs that someone isn't just against you, they're working to dismantle you, and you'll learn how to fight back, not with anger, but with awareness, restraint, and unshakable clarity. If you've ever felt like someone close to you is draining your soul while pretending to care, this video is your wake-up call. Like and subscribe now, let's begin.
Number 1.
The silent observer. Not all enemies speak. In fact, the most dangerous ones rarely do. Instead, they watch, they listen, they gather. The silent observer is the kind of person who always seems to be around, not in an overtly aggressive way, but in a way that feels just a little too convenient. They show up unexpectedly. They ask casual-sounding questions. Their compliments feel hollow. These people aren't trying to connect. They're collecting, and they're especially dangerous because they appear harmless. Their silence feels polite, but it's not rooted in peace. It's rooted in strategy. The Stoics had a word for this kind of presence: insidious. Not because it's loud, but because it's subtle. Seneca warned us, "A foe is more easily known than a false friend." This type of enemy doesn't make themselves visible through hostility. They hide behind politeness. They pose as listeners or quiet admirers. But make no mistake, what they seek is access. And once they get it, they begin to subtly undermine your sense of control. Not through confrontation, but through quiet intrusion, through listening too closely, through knowing too much. What makes this so dangerous is that most people crave being seen. We long for attention, someone to notice our efforts, someone to remember our stories. So when someone shows genuine seeming interest, we feel safe. We open up. But the Stoics urge us to pause. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be careful what you let yourself become impressed with," and nowhere is this more important than when dealing with the silent observer. The behavior isn't overt. They're not interrogating you. They're not accusing. They're simply there. But that's exactly what makes them powerful. Their greatest weapon is your assumption that they mean well. That's what disarms your suspicion, and that's what gives them time. Time to learn your fears, time to mimic your language, time to make you doubt yourself just enough to control you. But how do you spot this? And how do you respond without becoming paranoid or bitter? Start by listening to your body. The Stoics trained awareness, not just mentally but emotionally. Epictetus taught that we must not believe the impressions of our senses until reason has tested them. In modern terms, that means trust your gut, but verify with clarity. If someone's presence consistently leaves you feeling uneasy, even if you can't explain why, don't dismiss it. Emotional discomfort is a form of wisdom. It's your inner sentinel alerting you that something doesn't align. Next, test what happens when you create distance. Stop sharing personal stories. Stop volunteering emotional updates. Pull back, not with cruelty, but with intention. Watch their reaction. Do they push harder for access? Do they suddenly start acting colder? Do they force themselves into conversations? The silent observer is not used to being denied, and their mask often slips when their proximity is challenged. A real-world example of this pattern can be seen in the story of Eleanor Roosevelt. As First Lady, she was known for her calm, strategic demeanor, but even in her own circle, she faced subtle manipulation. One advisor, who presented himself as a close confidant, began using private conversations to influence her public stances. She eventually recognized the pattern, not because of a single betrayal, but because she noticed how he repeated things she never meant for others to hear. Her solution was not to confront, accuse, or create drama. It was simple. She stopped speaking freely around him, and his influence dissolved. That is the Stoic way. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a reactive blow-up, but a quiet, firm reclamation of space. You do not owe anyone your emotional blueprints, and when someone seems a little too invested in reading you, it's time to rewrite the script. Let your boundaries speak for themselves. Limit what you reveal. Pay attention to how they respond when they no longer have easy access to your thoughts. The Stoics remind us again and again, clarity is protection. The silent observer thrives on ambiguity. But when you act with purpose and restraint, you strip them of their advantage, because they can only manipulate what they understand. And the moment you become unreadable, you become untouchable. And here's something critical. The moment you feel like you're being emotionally surveilled, pause, breathe, ask yourself, what am I being encouraged to share, and why? The Stoics teach us that self-inquiry is the root of all strength. If you don't know what you're revealing or why you're being asked, you've already ceded control. And remember, the ones who collect information quietly often struggle when faced with silence. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop narrating your every move, their influence withers. Marcus Aurelius practiced this detachment, not from distrust, but from knowing the cost of overexposure. Your peace is found in privacy. Your power is found in what you withhold. Let them wonder. Let them guess. The less they know, the less control they have. If there's someone who seems curious but never shares, listens but never supports, feels more like a recorder, step back, observe the observer. Not with fear, but with clarity, because once you stop feeding them information, you start starving their influence. That's the first step in defeating the ones who don't just hate you, they study you, they wait, and they wear masks so convincing. You only see the truth when you stop talking long enough to hear what your instincts have been screaming all along.
Number 2.
The Saboteur strategy. This one doesn't confront you. They don't shout. They don't accuse. They don't start public fights. They do something far more insidious. They plant doubt quietly, consistently, strategically. This is the person who attacks your reputation. Not with accusations, but with concerns. Not with insults, but with whispers. They'll say things like, I'm just worried about them. Or don't get me wrong, I care about them. But that but is where the poison lives. It's never loud or obvious enough to be called out. Never clear enough to fight, but it spreads. The Stoics warned us. Reputation is not who you are. It is what others say about you. And if you anchor your worth in public opinion, you give your peace away. Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. The Saboteur knows most people aren't willing to do that. Most people desperately want to be understood, so the Saboteur uses that desire against you. What makes them so difficult to identify is that they operate through distortion, not direct confrontation. They provoke you, then step back and watch you unravel. And when you do react, they say, see, I told you something was off. The Stoics would say you've just handed them your power, because the real trap is not the rumor, it's your reaction to it. A modern example of this strategy can be seen in how Princess Diana was portrayed during the collapse of her marriage. Publicly, she was often painted as unstable, emotional, difficult. But behind the scenes, many of those narratives were seeded by insiders, people within her own circle who leaked carefully curated pieces of private information, not blatant lies, just slanted truths, taken out of context, repackaged, and handed to the press. As Diana once said, there were 3 of us in this marriage, and the world didn't just believe the spin, they judged her through it. Because once others adopt that distorted view, your actions are misread. You get cast in a role you never agreed to play. So how do you respond like a Stoic? First, don't chase the lie. Don't try to clean every rumor, correct every impression, or calm every critic. Seneca said, "Time discovers truth, and your greatest defense is consistency." Let your actions speak, act, stay still. When you don't react emotionally, you rob them of the climax they're fishing for. Second, stop trying to win over those who've already judged you. That's emotional quicksand. As Marcus Aurelius said, most opinions don't matter. Focus on self-mastery, not damage control. The more you try to change someone's mind about you, the more power you give them. Preserve that energy, use it to strengthen your clarity and your character. Third rule, reduce the oxygen. If you stop reacting and explaining, they lose what they need, your attention. The saboteur doesn't want truth. They want drama. The Stoic doesn't feed that. Silence becomes the wall, detachment becomes the weapon, and clarity becomes the shield. In your life, this might mean pulling back from mutual friends who spread gossip. It might mean no longer explaining your choices to people who've already decided you're the villain. It might even mean accepting that some people will never see your truth. And learning to live with that, peace comes from alignment. But here's what makes the saboteur especially dangerous. They don't just distort how others see you. Over time, they try to distort how you see yourself. If enough people start pulling away from you, if enough doubt seeps into your relationships, you begin to question your own reality. This is what modern psychology calls gaslighting, but the Stoics simply called it losing your inner clarity. Clarity to a Stoic was everything. It was the foundation of peace, seeing things as they are, not as you fear they might be. When people begin treating you differently because of someone else's manipulation, the Stoic response is not to bend yourself into a new shape just to win them back. The response is to stand firm in who you are. As Epictetus taught, if you are ever tempted to look for outside approval, realize that you have compromised your integrity. That's what defeats the saboteur. Not retaliation, but refusal. You refuse to explain. You hold your peace. You stay still in storms they create. And when you do this long enough, when your energy becomes unmoved and your presence unshakable, they lose interest. Their goal was confusion, and when you stop participating, the strategy fails. You win, quietly, with discipline, with presence. The Stoic path isn't reaction, it's refinement, and that's what they can't mimic. They can mimic your tone, your words, even your story, but they can't copy the quiet strength that comes from inner alignment. One of the most powerful examples of this was Fred Rogers. Yes, Mr. Rogers, a man whose reputation was challenged in subtle ways by critics who questioned his sincerity, his method, even his masculinity. He never fought back with anger. He stayed consistent, kind, clear. Over time, his quiet strength proved louder than any attack. His legacy wasn't built through argument, it was built through integrity. Let silence become your mirror. The truth always surfaces. If your name is twisted and chaos spreads, pause. If you feel the urge to defend or retaliate, pause. The Stoic path is not about proving your worth. It's about embodying it until even your enemies grow quiet, because they have nothing left to distort.
Number 3.
The false friend facade. Some enemies hide behind hostility, others hide behind kindness. And the most dangerous of all, they hide behind friendship. This is the false friend, the person who rushes intimacy, mirrors your pain, and gains your trust quickly. They don't walk slowly into your life. They barge in with shared wounds, late-night talks, and emotional confessions that feel real. But they're not here to support you. They're here to study you, to extract your vulnerabilities like a miner digging for gold. They know how to listen, how to affirm, how to say exactly what you need to hear to let your guard down. And once your guard drops, they collect weaknesses to use later. Not to build connection, but to build leverage. The Stoics warned us about this. Seneca wrote, "A friend to all is a friend to none." True friendship takes time, testing, silence, and above all, boundaries. But the false friend resists all of that. They want quick access and instant loyalty. They skip the slow burn and try to light a fire overnight. And if you question it, if you ask for space, they get hurt. They guilt you. They say, "I thought we were close." Or, "I've told you so much already, and now you're pulling away." They use emotional debt as leverage. To the Stoic, this is not friendship, it's manipulation dressed as connection. Marcus Aurelius said, "Look well into yourself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will always look." The Stoic trusts his own judgment, not the rush of emotion. And that's where you must begin, by pausing, by watching the pace, by slowing down the flood of emotional sharing and observing what's behind it. A good friend honors your pace. A manipulative one accelerates it. A real friend listens to your boundaries. A false one pushes past them. And here's the key. If someone is offended by your limits, they were never here for your truth. They were here for your access. The Stoic would agree. When someone rushes to know everything about you but reveals little about themselves, step back. That's extraction. True closeness isn't fast. It's earned through time, through action, through silence and slow trust. So what do you do when you spot the false friend? First, don't confront. Withdraw quietly. Change your level of access. Start sharing less. Not from anger, but from wisdom. Watch how they react when you stop pouring. Do they respect the shift, or do they push harder, guilt you, accuse you of being distant? The Stoic says, this is your answer. Second, test them with silence. Give them nothing. Don't explain. Just observe. A real friend stays. A false one demands. Third, remember that trust is not a gift. It's a contract, renewed in behavior, not in words, not in promises, but in quiet, respectful action. Seneca reminded us, the wise man is self-sufficient, but he chooses to have friends. You don't need closeness with everyone. You need alignment with a few. False friends fade or stay only to drain you. They disappear once you're no longer useful. Or worse, they stay, but only to take. Their presence is conditional, their concern is performative, and their loyalty. It evaporates the moment you say no. The Stoics would tell us this. Character is revealed not when someone enters your life, but when they're denied something they want from you. Watch what happens when you say no, when you pull back, when you don't share as freely. Do they stay kind? Or does the charm turn sharp? This is the inflection point where illusion ends and reality begins. Marcus Aurelius warned, never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. If someone's affection costs you your boundaries, it's not affection, it's control. And control wrapped in sweetness is harder to detect than outright hostility. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Stepping away isn't cold, it's conscious. You're not building walls, you're building gates for those who aren't entering. So don't apologize for becoming harder to access. The Stoics weren't available to all. They serve truth. And the truth is, if respect depends on access, it's not respect. When you stop giving them that, they show you who they are. And when that happens, let them go. Because the longer you entertain false loyalty, the longer you delay truth. Don't fight them, just become quieter. Don't mistake performance for loyalty. Be slow to trust, but once you do, be unwavering. You're reclaiming your peace. And if you need proof of this pattern in real life, look no further than Oprah Winfrey. At the height of her success, she shared how fame attracted many who claimed deep care, but in truth were seeking access to her influence, not her heart. She learned to separate those who celebrated her in private from those who clung to her in public. Her test was clear. Everyone wants to ride in the limo with you, but what you want is someone who will take the bus with you when the limo breaks down. What matters isn't what they say when things are easy, but how they act when you're empty. That's when masks fall. That's when roles reverse. And if they disappear when you set a boundary, that's not loss. That's clarity. Silence is your filter. When you stop needing validation, you stop falling for disguise.
Number 4.
Escalating aggression. Real harm doesn't always begin with a punch. Sometimes it starts with a joke, a subtle dig, a boundary pushed just a little. This is how escalating aggression works. It begins as something small. So small you almost feel silly reacting to it. A late reply, a backhanded compliment, an unwelcome touch on the shoulder that's passed off as friendly. They count on your hesitation, on your tendency to give the benefit of the doubt, and that's where they strike. Quietly, repeatedly, and with increasing boldness. The Stoics were acutely aware of this pattern. They understood that the first step toward being controlled is not violence, it's silence. Your silence. The moment you let a small disrespect slide, you've given permission for the next. Epictetus said, "Who then is invincible? The one who cannot be dismayed by anything outside his will. But your will can be worn down, not all at once, but through 1,000 cuts." That is the strategy of the aggressor who escalates slowly. They don't take your power in one move. They condition you to hand it over. At first, they mask it in charm. They call you too sensitive when you flinch. They laugh and say, "Come on, don't be dramatic." Their real goal is to train your nervous system to doubt itself. Every time you second-guess your reaction, they gain ground. Every time you excuse their behavior, they reinforce control. This isn't friendship. This is psychological warfare through politeness. But here's the deeper truth. It's not the act that erodes you, it's the pattern. Stoicism teaches us not to respond emotionally to every offense, but it also teaches us not to tolerate slow violations of our integrity. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If you allow too many moments of forced tolerance, you become someone who expects to be walked over. Your peace becomes the price of politeness. So what do you do when someone escalates? First, recognize the pattern. Escalating aggression always follows a rhythm. Small offense, denial, repeat. The Stoic response is not to lash out, but to interrupt the rhythm. That means naming the behavior directly and early, not cruelly but clearly. "I didn't like that. That doesn't sit right with me. Please stop." These simple statements are like walls, not to provoke, but to protect. Second, never justify your boundary. The moment you start explaining why something made you uncomfortable, you invite negotiation. The Stoic doesn't argue for his standards, he lives them. And if someone doesn't respect them, that's information, not a challenge, Seneca said. You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. Translation, you fear making things awkward, yet you wish for peace. You can't have both. Choose peace, and let awkwardness be the price. Third, document patterns. This is not for revenge, this is for clarity. When you record the behavior, even privately, It stops being a fog of feelings and becomes a record of reality. Gaslighting dies in the face of written memory. The Stoics were avid journalers for a reason, not because they were self-obsessed, but because they knew memory is fallible and your clarity is your freedom. Consider the story of Taylor Swift. At the height of her fame, she spoke about being slowly disrespected, bit by bit, in public and private. Not in huge dramatic ways, but in how people spoke over her, took credit for her work, or mocked her boundaries. At first, she said nothing, but over time, that silence bred entitlement in others. When she finally stood up, people called her too emotional or playing the victim. But in her own words, if you don't stand up for yourself, then who will? Her evolution wasn't rage, it was boundary. It was moving from reaction to deliberate protection. That's what Stoicism offers. Not coldness, not apathy, but strategic presence. The ability to see a pattern, honor your discomfort, and act with principle, not panic. Escalating aggression only thrives in confusion. It feeds on your habit of dismissing your intuition, of choosing social comfort over self-respect. The Stoic rewires this instinct. He learns to say, if I feel off, that's enough. You don't need proof. You don't need permission. You need presence. So when the pattern starts, stop it. When the dig lands, name it. When the discomfort grows, honor it. Your safety is not selfish. Your boundaries are not a burden. Don't wait for the explosion. Notice the tremors. That's where your power is. In the early detection, in the subtle no, in the clear redirection. Because at the end of the day, escalating aggression isn't just about the aggressor. It's about the parts of you still afraid to be misunderstood, still hooked on being liked, still avoiding discomfort. But Stoicism reminds you, growth lives in discomfort, and sometimes the cost of peace is the death of approval. You don't owe anyone unlimited access. You don't have to laugh it off, and you don't have to wait for harm to be obvious to make it real. Stand up not in rage but in clarity. Protect your space, not with noise but with quiet certainty. And walk away, not with drama but with calm conviction. Because that is how you stop a storm before it starts.
Number 5.
The patient predator. Some enemies move fast, but the most dangerous ones are slow, quiet. They don't rush you. They study you. They wait. They show up when you're at your weakest, when you're tired, broken, or healing from someone else's harm. This is the patient predator. They don't use force. They use timing. They offer kindness when you're isolated, support when you're emotionally raw, and attention when the rest of the world feels indifferent. But their interest is not rooted in care, it's rooted in control. The Stoics taught us that our most vulnerable moments are not when the world is loud, but when it's silent, when no one is watching. When the mask slips, that's where the patient predator makes their move. Marcus Aurelius warned, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." A life that never begins is often trapped in the hands of those who comfort you into dependency. This type of enemy doesn't push boundaries. They invite trust. They don't argue. They agree. They mirror your desires, affirm your values, and applaud your insights. They seem too perfect. And that's the red flag. Because over time, that kindness becomes a contract. And the moment you try to pull away, you see what was always underneath: control. At first, they are your biggest cheerleader, but later they resent your independence. Early on, they listen deeply. Later, they weaponize what you shared. Their strategy isn't to harm you immediately, it's to become indispensable. That way, when you realize something feels off, you're already emotionally entangled. That's when they apply pressure. After everything I've done for you, I was there when no one else was. These are not reminders of love. They are reminders of debt. The Stoic sees through this. He knows that help that turns into guilt was never help. That support followed by control is not support. It's surveillance, Epictetus said. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and true freedom means you are not indebted to anyone emotionally. Not for your healing, not for your peace, and not for your survival. So how do you recognize the patient predator? First, observe the pace of trust. If someone becomes essential too quickly, that's not a blessing. That's a tactic. Stoicism teaches us that everything of value takes time, including people. Someone who truly cares about you doesn't rush access. They don't need to be needed. They let closeness unfold slowly. Second, test their patience, create space, take time for yourself. Don't respond immediately. Don't overshare. Observe how they handle your silence. A healthy connection respects pause. A controlling one panics. The moment someone pressures you for access during your self-reflection, it's no longer about you. It's about their need to remain relevant. Third, notice how they react to your strength. Do they support your independence, or do they subtly compete with it? The Stoics remind us that virtue is self-contained. Seneca wrote, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." If someone starts to feel threatened when you rise, when you gain clarity, purpose, or distance, that's not love, that's possession. Consider the journey of Lady Gaga. She's spoken publicly about overcoming trauma and reclaiming identity in an industry that wanted her to conform. Along the way, she encountered people who initially offered support, but later attempted to mold, control, and confine her expression. What she learned was powerful. Those who truly love your soul will not shrink it to fit their narrative. And those who do, no matter how long they waited, were never there for you. They were waiting for a moment of leverage. The patient predator doesn't just want your attention. They want your dependence. And the moment you begin to withdraw, they'll repackage control as concern. I just want to make sure you're okay. I'm worried about you. But look closer, it's not worry. It's withdrawal anxiety. They're not afraid you're lost. They're afraid they're losing control. That's when the Stoic draws the line. Quietly, cleanly. Without need for confrontation, he doesn't accuse. He doesn't expose. He just removes access. Because he knows that some battles aren't fought. They're ended by distance. So what's the Stoic response? It's vigilance over your emotional gate. It's the courage to question kindness when it comes too fast, feels too perfect, and demands too much. It's the power to leave a connection that once felt comforting, but now feels controlling. You don't need to explain your exit. You don't need to wait for proof of betrayal. You only need one thing, a shift in your peace, when someone's presence begins to drain you more than it fills you. Listen, don't argue with their words, observe their patterns. Because the true Stoic isn't reactive, he's responsive, he doesn't burn bridges, he walks away before the fire starts. You owe no one the right to own your healing, and anyone who insists otherwise is not a healer, they're a handler. Remember, the most dangerous chains are the ones disguised as safety, and the greatest manipulation is not control through force, but through care. Step back, reclaim your space, and let time expose the difference between a protector and a predator. If you've made it this far, understand this. Clarity is protection. You're not paranoid for noticing patterns. You're not cold for walking away. You're just finally awake, and in a world full of manipulation dressed as love, silence dressed as safety, and kindness dressed as control. Being awake is your only defense. The Stoics didn't teach us to be fearless. They taught us to be prepared, to sharpen our perception, to trust our inner signal more than external approval. You don't need to react in rage. You don't need to prove anyone wrong. You only need to stand firm in your peace. And let that be your reply. So if this video opened your eyes, don't just watch. Remember, because the signs are subtle, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. Stay grounded, stay discerning. And if this message helped you, like the video, subscribe to the channel and keep walking the Stoic path, one clear step at a time.